thunderstorms, some severe tomorrow, and the mosquitoes is just like saying, like, yeah, that's what we want. That's what we need. More rain. So we're going to have to watch out for that. There was an article, and I want to read it to you. It says, let me read it. From Ron Olson, city manager, mayor and city council. Please accept this letter as my notice of resignation. I will clean out my office and then go on leave. My resignation will be effective upon completion of the usage of my accrued leave. I would like to gratefully acknowledge the many fine people I have worked with over the past 5 years. I will always treasure the associations and friendships that have blessed my life. Respectfully, Ron Olson. Now, my thought is he can resign, but do they have to accept his resignation? It seems like he resigned on his own terms. Hey, please accept this letter of my notice of resignation. What happened if he said no? They just signed him to a 3-year contract. He was bound to remain. He has a contract. And then not only did he say, please accept this, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to clean up my office, and then I'm going to go on leave. And my resignation will be effective upon completion of the uses of my accrued leave, which I think lasts until sometime around the end of June, around the 23rd or 24th of June. I don't know if they would have bought his leave time from him, but he took it. So he's on a vacation, a long vacation. So technically, he is still the city manager. He's still the city manager. That's why they can't name an interim city manager or a temporary city manager. I think Margie Rhodes, who's an assistant city manager and one of the last of the remaining team of 5, I think it was a city manager, 4 assistant city managers. Of course, there's a deputy manager in here somewhere or there. As I said earlier in the program, 1 left in November, assistant city manager, 1 left in January, another 1 left in February, and now he's gone in May. Within 6 months, we've lost 5 of the top city management team in the city. Within 10 months, we've had 3 water boils. The city manager signs a new contract and then abruptly resigns and says, this is the part that gets me, I will clean out my office and then go on leave. And my resignation will be effective upon completion of the usage of my accrued leave, which was a couple of months, evidently. I don't understand it. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's offering any reasons. Insight is just like done and it's over. Forget about it. I don't see it in the paper. I don't hear any questions about it in the mainstream media. And I guess I'm mainstream media, but, you know. So I've invited Homer Villarreal, editor and publisher of El Defensor. He's also an investigative reporter. And Homer, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Bob. An honor to be here.
And, you know, I asked when we talked, you said that you had some idea because of the many times that you've interviewed, spoken with, and over the years that you kind of have the dots connected in some sort of fashion.
Absolutely, Bob. You know, I'm just a country boy, started a newspaper, but what I did was I realized that in serving the larger community, there's power structures.
Yes.
And there's a system in place. In order for you to deliver that information, you need to establish as a reporter what you call a beat. So you go and develop certain contacts, like within the courthouse, within City Hall, within that provide you with information, or even have a gripe against the system. Sometimes the people that have gripes are more willing to at least give you a glimpse, even though it has a little bias of how the structure works. So basically today that's what I want to talk about. The water boils, is the water safe to drink? You know, how many are the questions the community is asking right now? You know, is the water issue being used as a political agenda for contracts. We see the Caller Times blasting the new current administration within the council, and I'll be talking about.
You mean the new members that got elected in the last election?
Yeah, of course, we have the current council and the previous council, and I'll be talking about that. What I'm going to do, like you said, is pull open that curtain and start looking for the first time at the complexities of the power structure within the city council. But we can't do it all today. It's just very involved. We're going to start looking at the proclivities of some of those factions that no one is talking about. Nobody really knows how that council is divided up or segmented politically. We're going to be talking about the history. In order to understand these players, you have to understand their organizations, because many of these guys are nothing more than byproducts of their parents, who are political players also, so on and so forth. So as people look at the history, they acquire a little bit more of a larger picture. It's like you're looking at a picture, but when we come together as citizens, I always encourage citizens to become citizen journalists. Now with this mobile phones, I love it, Bob, because people send me pictures. They say, look, Homer, I'm here at the site. What do you want me to do? Take some pictures, some recording, take some video, send it over to me. So I'm encouraging citizen journalism. My email is homervillarreal@gmail.com. Homer, Homer, Villarreal, VILLARREAL @gmail.com. Feel free to send me any comments, whatever you want. So basically, when we look at the water, we're looking at it's like the foundation of a house. You know, if the infrastructure of a city, of such a large city that spends millions and millions and millions year after year during the budget,
almost $1 billion budget, is over $800 million a year.
Yeah, I you know, looking at the streets and looking at what's going to be under there, once they discover what's under there, if you're going to be talking not about millions, you're going to be looking into the
billions,
$1 billion mark, because there's all sorts of things under there. So one thing I can predict right now is the community is going to be looking at the ratepayers are going to be looking at a more sizable bill pretty soon. They're going to start looking at bonds. They're going to. Can you imagine thousands and thousands of pipes that have been neglected over years? If we take a meticulous, just a glimpse view, a bird's eye view of what's going to happen is, we're going to discover all sorts of problems that are there. Now the water issue, this is the thing. Right now, today, I'm talking about the problem as of yesterday, that they made the announcement that the water boil has been uplifted.
Right.
Keep this in mind. When they take those samples, it depends where they take those samples, and they send them. If you go to the west side of Corpus Christi, you'll discover many of those areas have immediately you'll find West Nile virus. And interviewing some of these experts,
West Nile virus, that's a mosquito borne.
Yeah. What I'm talking is, if you take any sample, if you go to an area that is more likely statistically,
water, mosquitoes.
If you're looking at water pipes being next to sewer pipes, there's certain sites and parks that you can go. They neglect those centers. They don't talk about them. So don't think these problems are going to go. It's an immense problem that's accumulated over the years. The Caller Times is saying, let's blame the current administration. Is the previous administration to blame? Well, that's one of the questions we're going to answer today. And of course, we had the question is the water safe? But I'm going to be talking a little bit about the social political views of what's been going on with that department.
Maybe even find out why it's been neglected so many years. When they know they needed to do it. I had the city manager And the guy that was over the water area, he's an assistant city manager still, Van Vleck. And they talked about the thousands of miles of pipes, and it's all kind of hodgepodge. Some is concrete and asbestos, some is PVC, some of it is iron and cast, and I mean, some of it is rusted. I mean, it's crazy, the mix under there. But the streets where the pipes are the worst, where the streets are the worst, and the whole infrastructure, 80% of the streets in the city are in neighborhoods. Like you brought up, West Side and other older neighborhoods, and nothing's been done about it. When we come back, we will talk more about this situation, trying to look behind the curtain. How did we get here? Who's responsible? What is the lay of the land, and what has all the politicians been doing all this time? We back with more on News Talk 1440 Keys.
City Manager Ron Olson has resigned, and what it all boiled down to appears to be the third water boil in the last 10 months.
People's patience is running out on the thing.
But this wasn't the only hurdle Olson faced. Let's face it, cleaning up Corpus Christi is going to be a tough job for anyone.
There have been a number of issues that have kind of, I'm going to say stressed, troubled me over a period of time. And it was like, okay, this water advisory happened, and it's kind of like everything came together, and the time seemed right.
Olson doesn't leave without his fair share of successes. He fixed an $11.5 million budget deficit, making unpopular cuts to do so. He helped implement our street user fee and led the city through a tough time when Police Chief Floyd Simpson died. But as he puts it, it's been an up and down job.
And so it's kind of this roller coaster of getting things done and then kind of stalling out and experiencing, frustration over that. And
Olson says his thoughts of resigning went as far back as July. That's when he was a finalist for a city manager's job in southern Nevada.
That was a news report that went out, and when I watched them, they strained to say what the successes were. They talked about having the city through a tough time when the police chief died. They talked about how he had did $11 million shortfall. Well, that was recent. Yeah. When they had $11 million, and they took it out of some of the debt service fund and some other things. And what's your take on what he just said about stress is the right time, and it's there might be burnout and the successes, but things keep stalling. What stalled? It has to be his relationship with the council.
I to be honest, what he's saying really reflects his power groups or his factional affiliations take of what they want the community to know.
Say that again. What are you saying?
In other words, what I'm saying, the water issue or the three boils in the last 10 months is there's more than that. In other words, this is more than Ron Olson falling on his own sword. This issue is about accumulated problems that have surfaced, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. When Ron Olson first came, the very first day, and yesterday I spent my day interviewing middle management, top management, lower management people with the city of Corpus Christi. Ron Olson came like 5 years ago, and he created an environment of distrust. And he also told his friends why he was here, why he was brought in. He claimed there was corruption, certain people in power that either were on the council or had influence with the council told him that certain groups. So he began to sanction emails for a lot of the middle and upper and lower management people. He touted himself as a change agent. A classy title for Hatchet Man, huh? But and basically, immediately he created that agenda of mistrust. the people claimed, the poll that I took yesterday claimed that around 92%, and we're talking about the administrative staff, he had alienated almost immediately within those first month. So he proclaimed himself as a self-agent, but then people began to see what he meant by that. Slowly, he defined himself as change agent, and he said he was out to basically make the system better, to change it, to humanize it, to make it work better. So he touted himself.
Touted.
Touted himself, and he said he was going to get rid of people who weren't pulling their own weight, in other words. And then he started getting rid of people, and he was saying that there was this corruptive culture in place at the management level, and then he replaced a lot of people with folks from Colorado, I think Iowa. So people that had no idea about Texas laws. Can you imagine that? He was Mormon also. So there's also the word, there was some criticism that many of these guys might have been Mormon or were Mormon, and a lot of that is circulating because when you have a crisis such as this in Corpus Christi, people want meaning, and people are going to talk, and there's going to be rumor mongering, and people want, even if there's no explanation, people will invent an explanation, and the media knows that. So by utilizing the media and giving meaning as to why he's leaving, he's saying, well, I have to take personal responsibility for this water boils and blah, blah, blah. That was pretty much the press release that I think the real truth, I think, is that there were influential people in the council at the time that wanted to clean house, but they didn't want to do it. They didn't have the gumption. They didn't have the courage to go out and alienate people.
As the hitman.
Yeah. I think they brought him in because he didn't have any local ties as many of these guys did. But the bizarre and noticeable behavior that he displayed was that he used to, when he had started attending meetings after those few months, he had undercover officers with him in plain clothing, sitting in the back. He was paranoid. He started telling people one even heard him say that, keep your eye out, they're out to get me, telling the guy in the back, the undercover police officer. So clearly we had a paranoid, some type of paranoid or paranoid city manager to some degree.
Well, when you look at him, when he had that interview on Channel 6, he seemed unsettled. His mind seemed distant. But Homer, there have been people on this council who have sat there for 16 of the last 18 years, in particular Mark Scott.
Yes.
If I asked you who was the most powerful people on the council, I'm sure you would say Mark Scott, maybe second Mayor Nelda Martinez, and maybe third at this point, Chad McGill, who's moving up the ladder.
Yeah.
Because he's challenging them really most of the time. In addition to the problems, I mean, who would be the one, because he only has to count the 5 votes, who would be directing him to do what he did and then maybe cutting him loose now? And that's the falling on the sword part. Now that and he's gotten rid of all these people in management and everything is so haywire.
If you go to any top administrator, I remember I used to interview the superintendent here at some of the superintendents here at CCISD. They used to tell me, all you need, if there's 7 people on the board, all you need to do is know how to count to 4. And it's the same mentality when you're a top administrator. Keep in mind, we think we have a democratic system. We elect our officials. We put them in power. It's a governing board. But yet the system itself is very regimented, and they're appointed and they're not elected. And those are the guys that have the real power, and power flows from the top to the bottom. You know, and the guys at the top can issue pretty much mandates and get
I
things done.
remember when, and again, I've got to mention Mark Scott. He's been there the longest time. When those guys, just before they made a ruling on city council that no city councilman could go to a department head on their own directly. I had never heard of such a thing in my life.
And his wife made a killing with Scott.
I know her communications company.
Yeah, public relations.
But the point is, you cannot go on your own, and you're a city councilman. Why not? I'm elected by the people. I ain't elected by you. And they actually approved that. I remember that. We're trying to find out why Ron Olson has left, why the other city managers has left, what the problem is, the water boil over and over again, all that. Nobody's talking. Homer Villarreal of El Defensor says he thinks he knows why, and we're exploring that path. We'll be right back at 7:30. It's 7:35 here on News Talk 1440 Keys. I'm Bob Jones. Special guest Homer Villarreal, editor and publisher, investigative reporter for El Defensor. We're trying to get some answers, or trying to find out and answer some questions, and we figured that since nobody is really talking about what's really going on behind the scenes, in an article in the Caller Times, when was this? I don't remember the date. Early in the month, May 17th, I think. It says the Olson doesn't believe. An email sent to council members notified them of the development of his resignation. He doesn't believe anyone in the water department is negligent. Ultimately, he, as the manager of city operations, should be accountable. It happens I'm the guy who is ultimately responsible. It said, but that wasn't the entire reason. He said he had already been thinking about stepping down starting last summer. He said he had begun to question how much good I can do for the time I'm put in here. The first several years I was here, he said, it seemed like we were on an accelerated pace of improving things, and the pace slowed down. And it just got me thinking about, am I doing as much good as I hoped I'd be able to do? Now, the council is who he works for. He said everything seemed like it was going good. Now, if it slowed down because the council slowed him down. And so what Homer is saying is, let's take a look at the council and the previous council, at least the councils over his last 5 years and maybe a little bit before, to understand why all of this is happening, why he is saying, I can't really do anything to make a difference in all of the problems that the city has. And if that's the case, he's saying it's because of the council. He is the fourth of the top 5 executive positions among city employees to leave in the past 6 months. Former Assistant City Manager Wes Pearson, Susan Thorpe, and Gustavo Gonzalez. They all resigned from their position, one in November, one in January, one in February. And the only one that's remaining from that group is Deputy City Manager Margie Rose. And I think she was here before he came.
Yeah, and I think he placed her there to sort of get rid of some of the non-important political bureaucracy, sort of as a gatekeeper at some point, and that's what administrators did. But clearly, the theme that I've heard in interviewing all these individuals in management here and working within the city is that towards the end he got very paranoid after he did all these things, got rid of people that, and I think the people within the city council also told him, hey, you're being too harsh. You meat axing is just too stark. We don't want to shock the community. So he did come in with a passionate. Keep in mind, he went into offices there in the city of Corpus Christi, audited everything, confiscated computers. This guy had taken him out to eat, Bob, for instance. This is what this story he told me. Took him to eat a fancy restaurant, and they looked at his card, and it said city employees. So immediately he came to the conclusion, hey, man, this guy is using a city card to be buying food and blah, blah, blah. He was just welcoming him into the town and blah, blah. he didn't bother to look at it. It says City Employees Union. It was his own money that he was spending on him. So it tells you a little bit about his behavior. The next day, his computers were confiscated, his cards and everything else. So we clearly,
see if he was buying things on the city's dime.
Yeah, and we're starting. Well, it reflected, I think, his agenda.
Okay.
It reflected his reason, what he meant by change agent. I'm here as a change agent.
In other words, when they interviewed him and all behind closed doors, obviously they gave him the impression that there's a lot of corruption.
Yeah, well, of course, not to hang around with certain groups like the Bonillas and I heard all this stuff there that I'm sure power groups have their favorites and
sure. They
got their concentric circles. Yeah, let's deal with us guys, but let's don't let them into the core group of where we are. And they segment each other. They from each other. They're so.
And people believe, don't you doubt for a minute that there are not power players, power groups, or what we call insiders, or what others would call the elite in any structure, in any city, in any town, in any community.
What I heard from interviewing management people is that he targeted those that had been there the longest. They were in the most jeopardy. A lot of them were, of course, minorities. It didn't matter to him that they had all this knowledge base that about pipes and about the system. And then he started to, I said, and the question I followed through after that, because you got to get suspicious when you're a reporter and they have a bias or they have an interest, was, maybe he was trying to cut down on the budget. Well, what I found out, what the people he brought them in at higher pay. So that was clearly not the case. If he brought them in at higher pay, he was trying to get rid of people. And basically what he was, after a while, you see certain patterns when you interview people, certain reoccurring themes. And it was that he was trying to destroy political connections. There were certain change orders. He wanted to disrupt certain processes. Like certain people basically wanted to micromanage and dominate the municipal structure, and that's what it was all about. And I guess the question is, people will ask, he was involved when the former police chief died. The media saying they're creating all this sympathy and wonderful things for him.
But actually, I was at the memorial that they had for the chief. And that was the first time that anybody had seen any emotion in the city manager, Ron Olson. And that kind of, even I started thinking about him a little differently, because we knew he came off as aloof, as cold, as stoic, and the whole 9 yards, because like you said, he had a job to do. But the reason why he choked up and actually began to cheer, and I was there, and this is my assessment, is that he heard so many people talk about their personal relationship with Chief Simpson. They talked about how he would come to the office at lunch, and they'd sit in the office and they'd chit-chat, how he would do this, or they met the family.
The counter opposite of who he was.
Yes, and what he said was, he choked up when he said this. This is I'm telling you, he said, and this is when he began to break up and choke up. What he regretted was that in all the time, he said he picked him because he was the best qualified guy. He said, but in all this time, he came into my office and whatnot, I never, ever referred to him by any other name other than Chief Simpson. In other words, I had a strictly professional relationship, no more, no less, and didn't get to know the person that this whole community had known personally and loved.
Yeah.
That's not the relationship I had. And he was choked up. He said he regretted that he came in, and now it's making sense to me that if he came in to do that job, he couldn't afford to get friendly. He couldn't afford to get to build personal relationships here because of what his job was.
Hitler said it best in his book, what's the name?
Mein Kampf?
Yeah. He said, they asked Hitler, shall we kill all the Jews? He said, no. We need somebody to remind us of who our enemy is. He said, because if we don't have that enemy in front of us or that mission, our conscience will bite us, So basically,
you start to regret what we did.
There's a certain rationale similar to that in management, but I was kind of critical when I interview people. I want to make sure they're giving me a true story. I want to make sure I see certain patterns. And I said, I asked the question to some of these people in management here with the municipality. Are you saying he's tyrannical? That's kind of a strong word to use. Well, they pointed to a lot of things, and they reminded me of certain things. You remember the voters approved that fire station on the other side of town on Ayers. If you go back and review some of those articles in the internet, surprisingly, Ron Olson, even though the people, I think it was the bonds of 2012 or something like that, or 2010. The people wanted a fire station in that area of town, and they're still very passionate about that. But surprisingly, Ron Olson brought an outside consultant, and then he told the council, "We don't need it. We don't need the fire trucks there. We don't need more firemen there." So basically, here we see. Yet he undermined what the voters had voted for. It doesn't matter what the voters voted for. It was his decision. So you clearly saw something that transcends a normal administrative administrator carrying out his duties.
Well, here you have March 2011. Ron Olson, he was an administrator in Polk County, Iowa. That's where he was working at the time. He was hired to replace Angel Escobar. And I know we can talk about him a little bit later.
Yeah.
He was brought in specifically, they said, to address a looming $11.5 million budget shortfall. In June, now he was hired in March. On June of 2011, within 3 months, he announces a sweeping reorganization of City Hall. Sweeping. He combined 7 city departments. He cut 66 jobs from the proposed budget, and the change, which is effective immediately, no time, no great, closed the $11.5 million budget gap. And then the following January, 6 months later, he fired the director and assistant director of the municipal court, filing an investigation. And then by 2012, he picks Assistant Police Chief Floyd Simpson. On 2013, they approve a plan by the city staff for updating street designs. But basically, from 2011 to 2013, he cut the budget.
Yeah.
And he fired folks.
And I think as a result of his management style, especially, we're going to start to see all this mid-axing he did, and I'll be talking about the budgets and the different little lumps of money and how they were used. Residents should expect, and don't be surprised, rate increases and a lot of things are going to surface. Those bonds still, they're going to have to be fulfilled. There's going to, once they start digging and start a meticulous plan looking at every pipe, they're going to discover so many, just not infrastructure things. They're going to start looking at the different tiers that money was
allocated for it?
Yeah, well, monies are not going to be there. The general fund is for the whole community, and right now we see with, for instance, Valerie Gray, the head of the street department. We see this committee, this advisory board that's saying, let's spend $17 million a year for the
actually,
streets.
They have 3 plans. One is 17 is the cheapest.
Yeah.
The other one's progressively go
but
higher.
just think about it for a second. We're talking about monies from the general fund. We're talking about taking money away from other departments that's going to further deplete the functionality of services that this community needs. Keep in mind, like for instance, the water department, they have what you call an enterprise fund. Those monies are just allocated to change the pipes, to deal with that situation. They can't be moved around unless the council takes some type of legal action. We're talking about the general fund. They won't find it, Bob. Believe me, they will not find 17 million. And if they do, they're actually gonna just basically go in and say this administrator's not influential enough or don't have the power savvy that he has in this organization. Let's just cut his budget. And what's going to happen is going to pipe down again. The taxpayers are going to pay for it at some point,
one way or another. We'll be right back with more of the Bob Jones Show, News Talk 1440 Keys. 7:53 on the Bob Jones Show, News Talk 1440 Keys. We're assessing the water, the resignation, overall situation with investigative reporter, editorialist, publisher of El Defensor, Homer Villarreal. Want to take a quick call?
Yeah, let's go.
560-5397-560 KEYS. Vicente, you're on with Homer Villarreal.
Good morning. I want to make a brief comment and have Homer make comments on it. When Olson was rearranging everything, he made the chief wife, Mrs. Olson, who was in charge of a health program, her life miserable, and she wasn't very happy. And before the tragic death of the chief, they said that he was already looking for a job. He wanted to get out of here because of Miss Olson. Can you confirm that, Homero?
Hey, Vicente, really the way I heard it and the people I interviewed were very clear. The people in administration pointed out that when Ron Olson came, he told everybody he was only going to be here a few years because he was not going to last that long. When a top administrator says that, Vicente, he says it for a very important reason. It means he came here to execute a controversial agenda, meat-axing people that have been in power for it's going to alienate their families, their friends, their relationships. It creates a chaotic opposition against the person that, keep in mind, some administrators here had been working for 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden they get rid of them. That individual still has friends and influence. So apparently he was not going to last long. The people on the inside knew that it was just a matter of time. That's why you saw systematically a lot of the top administrators resign recently, and that pretty much answers your question, Vicente, I think.
Yeah, go ahead. So here we have a city manager who was hired specifically and said, my doing what you want me to do will only allow me to be here between 5 years and 7 max, but and within 5 years, he said, I'll be gone. He said it because I'm here to do a certain thing. And right off the bat, like he got hired in March of 2011, and by June of 2011, he immediately combined 7 city departments and cut 66 jobs from the proposed budgets.
Also, Bob, let's look at the economy. They say we want to create jobs. For instance, I heard Michael Hunter, when he was brought in, he said, and a very idealistic young man. I like what he said. He said, I want Corpus Christi to grow. I'm a pro-grow Corpus Christi. We also saw Chad McGill join him in hand and saying, yeah, we're poor growth, and we're trying to bring tourism, make Corpus Christi tourism. And it sounds so beautiful. But the reality of it is, look at the infrastructure. Who's going to come to a place that has immense financial problems? What businesses are going to come to a place where the infrastructure is crumbling and has 100-year-old pipes? The money has been either rerouted or ignored. Who do you blame for this? We're going to be talking about who's responsible for the wire boils and problems. And I would first of all, go ahead, Bob.
One of the things is we just had thousands of people come in here for Beach to Bay. over 2,000 teams. Each team has about 5 members. So multiply that. You got 10,000 more people come in, and they couldn't wash in the water. They couldn't let water get in their mouth. Can you imagine? Is that what you're talking about? Bringing people into a city where they're on a royal border alert. They understand they can't drink the water. They were all committed. They had all put out money. And I guess the water people made a fortune.
Hunter, and we have to be critical as citizens. We have to look at Chad McGill also, who took the leadership role, who used to be with a former clique. Now he found that now he has basically 3 Hispanics supporting him: Lucy Rubio, he has Brian Rosas, and he has Rudy Garza, right. and now he has a majority. But always keep in mind, he was with the other side. It jumps over. We also see the progressive influence, which we're going to be talking about, that has infiltrated. We saw at one time the Democratic Party being taken over by progressives pretty much. And now we're starting to see the current city council a factor of where a progressive agenda of people, of known people.
Agenda 21 put into the City 2035 plan, which is a progressive introduced by the vice president of the socialist of the world. I mean, wow. Okay.
Ron Olson didn't fall on his own sword, and I'm going to be talking about that.
Okay, he might have been pushed on it. It's 7:59. You're listening to KEYS, Corpus Christi, Texas. We'll be back with more, a look behind the curtain. What's going on in this town? City managers, water, all the rest. Don't go away. Your calls and comments are welcome. And it's 8:05 here on the Bob Jones Show on News Talk 1440 Keys. Welcome, my friends, to the machine. More news, more information, more facts. Do you trust your water? Do you trust them? The people who said it's safe to drink. Will you drink it right away? Will you wait a couple of days? 560-5397, 560 Keys. Talking with Homer Villarreal. One of the things that you were talking about is that one of the results of the mass chopping when they hired Ron Olson was people with institutional memory who knew where we were, how we got there, what the situation was.
Knew where the pipes were, knew where the problem areas were, heads were cut off, and
it all removed to balance the budget.
And it basically came to rules where the influence of those individuals put enough pressure on the community to hold public officials accountable, and pretty much Olson knew that the majority was not there anymore, so he used this to justify leaving. But of course, his management style will what he did is going to hunt us with higher fees.
Well, a lot of these same people. Remember when when the citizens bought into the idea of having a citizens advisory committee ad hoc set up to look at how the city was doing the street work, how the city was applying tax money for repairs, what the situation was. And that report is supposed to be coming out shortly.
Yeah.
That report is supposed to be coming out shortly. But remember, in the midst of this, in the report, the one faction on the council was trying to put ex-city councilmen like David Loeb, like Rex Kinnison, these guys who had been on the council when the can was kicked down the road, and it was decided consciously not to repair these local citizens' streets, not to do the necessary work, to put the money in other places in other parts of town. These are the people that they wanted to put on the committee.
It sounds like the Railroad Commission. In order to sit in the Railroad Commission, you had to work 20, 30 years with the Railroad Commission. So,
and here's the point. They wanted to put these people back on to continue whatever it is their agenda was. Ron Olson comes in, does what he's asked to do, all in the name of budget. Well, I was on the RTA board once, and RTA, no matter what you say about the RTA, the legislators wrote into it that the RTA would be involved in economic development. I remember when Hugo Balanga was the state representative, he said if more money wasn't put into economic development, he would institute changes to the law that created regional transportation authorities and take all their funding away. That's how upset he had gotten at the time, because it called for being involved in economic development. And I remember Jerry Gates, he was the president of Corpus Christi National Bank, and then it became another bank. But he was on the board. He called for a $1 million cut in the RTA's budget. Now, he was just dealing with money, dollars and cents. We got this problem in the budget. We're going to cut the budget. You know, look good in the public, da-da-da-da. He didn't talk about what would be cut. He just said cut the budget. This is similar to this Ron Olson. There's 11.5 million shortfall.
But that tells you something, Bob. When somebody doesn't know what's involved and is asking for money, he's trying to raise a pot of money to execute an agenda. He don't care where it comes from.
Right.
He says, look for it and find it.
When the RTA did that, they lost some of the best talent in transportation that any transportation agency in the world had. Do you hear what I'm saying? Because they had to cut these guys. These guys say, hey, I'm gone. You take my salary because we... What I'm saying is that sometimes it pays to find other ways or to tighten your belt or to do some other things. But when you just go for the money first, there's a price to pay. And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with it? Because these same people, Homer, who was on the council and had him come in and he's doing all this stuff, these same people were trying to float a $150 million bond to build a downtown park.
Well, the
$54 million a pop, the Destination Bayfront. How can you have your streets so deteriorated in the neighborhood where people live, and you trying to put $54 million in the park, and you selling the parks you do have? It didn't make sense to anybody.
You know, when money's involved, look at Mark Scott. Look at his wife. She created Scott Public Relations immediately when he was the city council. I think he's been there, you said, the longest.
He's been there 16 of the last 18 years.
Yeah, then she gave her organization some German name. I think we discussed it. Kalo, and then now she ran for the... school board, CCISD first.
The Chamber of Commerce.
But
then she became CCISD board, and they had hundreds of millions of bond money. Now she's over Del Mar, and they're doing hundreds of millions.
Yeah, and they're going to be building all this brand new.
Well, the Texas Department of Transportation has hired her company to do PR for the new bridge they're building.
Can you imagine all those contractors they're dealing with to build first when she was in the school district, and now with Del Mar, they're going to open these new campuses or satellite stations. All the money that's involved and their dealings with contractors, and like the Scotts really are a model couple that learn how to make money utilizing taxpayers' money. And I hate to put it so bluntly, but I've seen it so repeatedly that and they gotten awards for it, you know, going after taxpayers' money. Public officials, when there's money, Bob, you know, they go after. That's why they sit in they want to sit in the Del Mar board region. They want to sit in the CCISD, in the nonprofits, because there's monies there. All sorts of monies to pay. Like she has a public relations company. They do advertisement. They do promotion, so on and so forth. So we're starting to see that. You know, Carolyn Vaughn, who sits on the city council, I think, made a statement. She made a statement recently that even she came to the awareness. She was there, and she said, we're going to bring somebody from the outside maybe to look at a new city manager. She said, hold on. It was like the Freudian slip. You know, she said, maybe the person we have right now will do a good job. Let's just
it's not a Freudian slip. Carol is a businesswoman.
Yeah, and also, Bob, you know, she said, we have a human, I think, a relations department. They get paid $100,000 to do this. We're not utilizing this.
Human resource department.
You know, that's pragmatic thinking. You're judging things by what you have, by their results.
I always felt like this, and we did this in the RTA with Ricardo, my position was, if we don't have quality people within our internal city organizations and whatnot who can move up the ladder and become the top person, then we ain't got the right kind of people working in the first place.
Now that Olson's gone, we're going to need somebody that can hit the ground running, because there's problems. We need somebody that knows this native community, that has that. We can't afford to hire somebody that's going to reestablish all these relationships. There's millions of dollars. I hear they're in the red, right? It might be thousands of dollars. Ronnie Canales also reported that at Lorem, Texas, are going to be lower. The oil and gas dollars that they get are going to be lower. So, the money's not coming in. So we're starting to see that we need somebody that knows this community, that's native, that can get the traction immediately and mobilize this thing. But we're not getting the full story. We're not getting the full details. We have Chad McGill saying, we want to establish this community as we got that idealism versus that pragmatism.
That's part of the leadership Corpus Christi deal. I'm a graduate of Corpus Christi class 22, which was the best class they ever had. And what they do is they teach you the lay of the land, the history of Corpus Christi, the founders, and you meet the movers and shakers. You meet the people from religious community. You meet the people from the corporate community. You meet people from the political committee. I imagine one of the most impressive things I experienced when I was in my class was the fact that Joe O'Brien, and then there was city manager, what's his name, Juan Garza?
Yes.
They actually sat there and discussed issues, both of them. Now, one was the city manager, and the other one was a city gadfly who really looked at the taxes and looked at the city budget and all those kind of things. And it made sense. I mean, my question was, why don't these guys sit together and talk before they do something? Why did they have to be adversarial? But then I began to realize one side wanted to do something and had connections, and the other side was on the outside saying, I'm representing the taxpayers. But the bottom line, again, is watching the city deteriorate over the years. Somebody sent me a text, says, kicking the can down the road, that can is now in a pothole.
Well, we have the Color Times firing away, creating a target, saying the new majority, the new council majorities to blame. But if, like you said, in the past, they're not looking at the previous administration.
That's right.
This problem goes back to 10, 20 years. We have the Scotts that we started. Scott, when he first ran, I think he ran under a single member district.
He ran a district, and
later he ran he ran at large, and he termed out. He ran again. So he's been aware of the mosquito problems. He's been aware of the water problems. Has he been asking the questions? We allocated so much money to fix these pipes. No, he's asking, how much money do you need this year? He's not asking the right questions.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. Remember, he was one of the advocates for a $54 million bond to build a downtown park. And that's what I'm telling you about the leadership thing. They do visioning, because when they give you the history of the city and the town and introduce you and train you as future leaders, they end up by saying, how would you like Corpus Christi to look in the future? And the problem with that concept is not that they don't vision. Their vision has to be carried out with other people's money.
What the early Democrats used to do, the budget never runs out. But basically, you're right, Bob. If you're taking away from the infrastructure if you start thinking like that.
And we'll be right back. 560-5397, 530-KEYS. The city is crumbling, and they wanted to build parks, but it didn't just start yesterday. Stay with us. 821 on News Talk 1440 Keys. wasn't getting many answers. Nobody wanted to talk about the city situation, how we got there, what was the cause, why the city manager left, why so many of the top management left, or nothing. Homer Villarreal is my guest, exploring what's behind the curtain. Let's go take a quick call, though, okay?
Absolutely.
560-539-75 is okay. Why is David? You're on with Homer Villarreal.
I'll give you a quick story. I used to work as a senior accountant for the city 25 years ago. We were at a point where the city couldn't even make payroll. The way they solved the problem is where the federal courthouse stands today. They sold that piece of land to the feds, and then everybody was happy again, and everybody got a bonus. But the problem you had is back then the certificates of obligation came in. And what those were basically bonds that said you needed no revenue. The good faith of the city would support those bonds.
Mm-hmm.
All these slick bond salesmen came in, and the city sold all kinds of certificate obligations with no revenue backing. So now you got to pay those debts back. And it's not just our city. There's cities all over the country that are having these problems. I haven't looked at the debt service payment. I haven't really looked at the budget in 27 years. But it'd be interesting to look at it to see how much of our budget is going to debt service.
Yeah.
All I got to say.
No, I understand what you're saying, because certificates of obligations don't have to be approved by voters. You can just do it.
That's exactly right. And they don't have to do it backed by revenue either. It's just the good faith of the city.
In fact, I believe and tell me if I'm correct, when they did the Mary Rose pipeline, the citizens were fighting it through the Taxpayers Association. They went to a court in Uvalde who ruled that only the city council was responsible for rates and payments and all, and invalidated. They couldn't appeal it. But here's what happened. They did the certificate of obligations, but the city system, the mayor and them, sued the city of Corpus Christi in order to get the right to do. And when you do a general obligation bond, you are saying that we can back it. And how do they back it? By raising the rates that the citizens pay for services.
Well, they're saying by the good faith, it's like a government bond of the city. You don't even have to raise the rates. There's nothing tied to it.
Right, but I'm saying for the city to pay it back, they had to get some money from somewhere. So a
lot of revenue now is going to pay back these bonds from all cities.
I got it.
What's happened is all these cities kicked the can down the road for years, and now they're all having to pay it back. It's like our federal government. We're $19 trillion in debt. We got to pay it back. It doesn't disappear.
Okay, and so that's probably one of the reasons why.
That's pragmatic.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that, man.
All right, enjoy your show.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, David.
It's 824. He's right. How much is debt? Remember, they just had a potential $11 million shortfall again recently, about a month or so ago, and they had a meeting, and the city council voted to close that loophole. And what did they do? They took $4.5 million out of the city's debt service. That they pay for debt, and they build up a reserve in the debt service. They took some from here, they moved there. Same thing. Same thing.
The community, we reached a point where the community needs to police these guys. We used to have the Taxpayers Association at one time, very proactive. We used to have other organizations that would get involved. Now it's hardly not there, and you know, as the saying goes, the thing is that the consumer approach, people need to say, this is my money, this is the money in my community. If people are talking about dreams and creating all this experimental endeavors that involve taxpayers' money because they were part of Leadership Corpus Christi, yet they don't have the pragmatism or the knowledge. That's why it's important to have city councilmen that have been involved, know the system, know the structure. If we lose this knowledge base, for instance, Chad McGill saying we need to grow Corpus Christi. What is he saying? I mean, he sounds like a Trump answer. I'm going to fix America. I'm going to make America more beautiful. Well, what are the specific rules? Who's going to pay for it? Am I going to pay for it? Shed McGill, Michael Hunter, you talked about tourism and attracting them in this way. Have you done it before? Is it a workable plan? Is it a pragmatic plan that will work? And the thing is, they don't have the knowledge base, I think, in my opinion, to be dealing with such complex issues, and I think that's a big problem in Corpus Christi. I think the research needs to be there. The knowledge base, I think there needs to be powwows of people's knowledge, welcoming them back, the people that Olson alienated, bringing them back to this community.
They got Councilman Garza on the TV walking up, taking a water boil sign down, leaning over and drinking out of a water fountain.
Well, I'm going to be talking about that also, because there had been, TCEQ, certain bacteria that they found in the water was not reported. In fact, there's an individual right now asking for open records where, and I would be worried. I would be, play it safe. I would still boil the water if you have children. That's me. It's coming from me. It's not coming from the city of Corpus Christi. Also, everything I say here, I want to hold this radio station or this entity. It all comes from my perspective, my view of my feelings for this lovely community named after, of course, the body of Christ.
And the key again is when you have people that run for city council and they have backers and they get elected, do they have the skills, the background that would enable them to be helpful and advantageous? Now, I have talked to Chad, and he has spent a lot of time understanding from the city's point of view how they do business. Okay, he can tell you how they do this and what this is done and moving this here. But
when you have a crisis, Bob, you need somebody that can hit the ground running, that already can get some traction. We have a crisis in Corpus Christi. We can't be talking about dreams. We can't be living in glass bubbles. We're talking about a serious health issue. Keep in mind, it doesn't only affect Corpus Christi. There's the South Texas Water Board. I think they channel water to Agua Dulce, to Robstown, to other communities out there. They didn't have a water boil out there. I didn't find out until recently that the pipes connect with the different water systems down there. How come the people were not warned? Was the testing done? Those questions need to be, every year they have a budget. People have been asking me, well, Homer, you're very critical, you're a social commentator and this and that, but who's responsible then? Well, I would say all of them are, because when you have a budgetary process and you award so much money to a particular department, the water department, they're supposed to update you what's needed. You're supposed to follow through and then check where they're at. But
remember this, Homer, they made a conscious decision that streets, let's say the condition of a street goes from 0 to 100, okay? They decided that they were only going to take care of streets that was 50% or higher, that anything that was below that had to be completely torn down and rebuilt, which they decided not to put any money into, and then turned around and said that 80% of those streets are in communities and neighborhoods. Yeah. And without addressing it, they went and annexed out at the Chapman Ranch, where they have to extend more pipeline, more city services. With these folks on the south side, sure, they can vote for you. They got newer neighborhoods. Still got potholes.
Just a quick footnote. In the last 20 years, the utility bills have increased by 100%, by the way, Bob. So the community should know that, and it's time to police.
We'll be back with more Homer Villarreal on the Bob Jones Show, trying to get some answers to questions that's in all of mine. Do you think the water's safe? Do you trust the water? Do you trust them? I don't know. If you know what's going on or you got an idea, let me know. 560-5397, 560-KEYS. It's 8:30. water. Where's the water? Can I have some water? No water. How much is water? Bottled water? Canned water? What are we going to do about water? And that's the tip of the iceberg, according to Homer Villarreal, publisher, editor, investigative reporter, El Defensor. He says, I think I got some answers, because this is not just about water. It's about an entire infrastructure of a community that is done. This community overall is over $1 billion in debt right now, according to the Texas Controller's Office. And we're talking about piling more debt, and not just taxpayers approved debt, but certificates of obligation, voter approved debt. We're talking about debt and money and all that has been spent, and yet the estimate is between $800 and $1 billion to upgrade the wastewater, which is being pushed by the EPA on this town. Another $1 billion. In fact, David Loeb said at the first meeting of people who were talking about getting together to investigate the streets and the infrastructure, he said it could cost as much as $2 billion. And we owe $1 billion. You're talking about another $2 to $3 billion, and that doesn't even talk about maintaining what we have. How do you get into a position like this? I think Homer is saying by putting people on council who don't have the knowledge base, the experience, and maybe even the wisdom to oversee what goes on. And maybe one or two council people are calling the shots. Is that what I hear?
Well, let's ask the question, why do we have a new council majority? I think a lot of people in Corpus Christi got upset when we had issues like Destination Bayfront,
right,
where you had some of those dreamers that's were really coming up with the previous administration was trying to come up with selling to the public the big idea, how to improve this community, and let's spend a lot of taxpayers' money, we'll attract people. And Destination Bayfront was one of many. And Destination Bayfront, basically, what they tell the taxpayers up front is they were going to basically spend taxpayers' money, turn it over to a private group, and basically give public land away to a private group. They were tied in with American Bank.
Field. They did that with American Bank.
And I think after that, in the baseball field, the concession stands, the money that were being made from Whataburger Field were going to a private group, and the taxpayers, we pay for it. Now a private group's getting also the parking fee, so on and so forth. And I think the voters got angry, and I think that led to the new administration in power.
It's 838-560-5397 if you want to weigh in, 560-KEYS. Fred, good morning. You're on with Homer Villarreal.
Good morning, Mr. Homer, and good morning, Mr. Bob. Listen to your show. Enjoy it. Like I was telling him, I've been born and raised, I've been over 50 years here in Corpus, and since I was a little kid, I can remember them always saying Corpus has the potential to be one of the greatest cities in America, but you got a few people that don't want it to grow unless it grows at their rate, where they can keep their hands on it. And a classic example of, I say, is you just talked about the American Bank Center. Why would they want to build a bank center there, knowing that all that other land is owned by that Rawlings guy that owns the Omni, where hotels can't go up there? I'm sure, and I bet you investigated, if he owns all that land around the bank center, I bet you he's the one that sold the land to the city so they could build a bank center.
Yeah,
there.
We're starting to see a lot of the projects being concentrated there along shoreline. You're starting to see that for a reason. We're starting to see the tearing down of Memorial being moved over to shoreline, the crisis center, so on and so forth. Yeah, go ahead.
That's the way it's always been. And like a classic example, when SeaWorld, I remember when San Antonio first got SeaWorld, we were enraged. Like, how is it that Corpus is right on the coast? It's a big city. We're right on the coast where the Gulf is there, but they got to go to 150 miles inward to build SeaWorld.
Well, here's something that happened, Fred, because I remember when, let's take Schlitterbahn. They were going to come in years ago, but some members of the Planning Commission, I'm not going to call their names, some members that sat on the Planning Commission and some others and some lawyers, some local people said, hey, we can do this ourselves. And they're supposedly going to buy land up on SPID, the northern part of SPID, and they were going to build one themselves. See, a lot of times the local folks said, hey, let's do it. Let's not bring these guys in. Let's do it. Now they done wound up doing what? Bringing it in anyway.
Exactly. And I bet you look into it, It's so like there and their people they can control the money. You know, it's like when you see these big construction jobs. You know, it's always the same big construction companies.
Yes.
There's nobody else different.
It's like right now the streets. We gotta ask the questions: is the street crisis gonna create another opportunity for the big contractors, for the Joe Fultons, for the Joe Adames, and other
well, it's
developers?
even more than that, you know, because there are people who are lobbyists for the asphalt company and for this company. There's a connection to it, and they lobby to get these guys contracts. They're insiders.
Well, we see, for instance, you know, ain't it a shame? You know, we're starting to see where Ron Olson brought in a company from San Antonio to cut our lawns, like there, that park in Cheryl Park, and also the one in front of the federal
our water
courthouse.
bills, utility bills are contracted out to San Antonio.
But you know, they're traveling 150 miles. They're bringing in all this equipment. Why not hire local? I mean that would be the pragmatic thing. You see stuff like that because there's no accountability. I think. Yeah.
You know, and I kind of wonder if you start thinking about it, why would Whataburger and why would H-E-B move their headquarters? Was there a little conflict there where they didn't want to play with the rules that these guys wanted to play? So that's why, I mean, because Whataburger and H-E-B basically have their roots here. Why would they leave here?
Originally they said they wanted to be the closest sources of airplane and all. I mean, it costs more to fly down to Corpus Christi than anywhere else, but that's the reason they gave. Thank you for your call, Fred. Appreciate it.
You have a blessed one, man.
You too. It's 8:42.
You know, Bob, I'm really enjoying this, that the community is asking questions, simple questions. You know, there has to be a point of departure. I don't think I can explain this because complex issue in one day. There's just no way. It's such an involved issue. But I think if you owe it to your families, it's your money. We have to start looking at ways where that money can be utilized properly in this community. We need to hold our public officials to be asking the proper questions. If not, hold them accountable, the different department heads, not to rubber stamp things anymore. We're in a crisis situation, yet we have this idealistic young man or grown-ups that didn't grow up or didn't have maybe they were too sheltered, that's creating this crisis. If we're going to have the focus on thinking big and like we had under when Mark Scott had the majority, and we're gonna have that mentality and then giving to the EDC. We were $1 million here from the port, the city, so on and so forth, and yet there's zero growth. Somebody has to hold them accountable. You know, the city of Corpus Christi cannot even audit the Corpus Christi Economic Development Corporation. That's not being asked. You know, it's very important that this issue of Destination Bayfront, I think when the people defeated it, the psychology was high. I think that same organization put these new people in.
Well, originally it was presented as something that was going to be privately funded. And at the last minute, they changed it to tax funding. One councilman, in fact, Councilman McGill said publicly that he had a contributor because the oil and gas was booming who was going to commit $1 million, and they told him, don't take it. Why? Because they were going to switch to tax funding. Charlie, good morning. Welcome to the Bob Jones Show. You're on with Homer Villarreal.
Hello, Homer. Hello, Bob. Good morning to you.
Good morning,
sir.
One
of the things that annoys me so much is about this is how we just throw our money away instead of looking at the bigger picture. We didn't need that Colorado lease. That was what we paid for it. But Melda Martinez just had to get in there and show her side of a big, huge pipe, thinking she was going to be the new roads. That wasn't needed. We don't even have first digs today. And this $700,000 to Sam Kane to the meat packing factory. You know, we give our money away. It's crazy how we give our money away. You know what they should have done instead of giving Sam Kane $760,000? They should have had all the ranchers in the valley that needed this meat packing place here. What they should have done is gone to them and said, we need 25,000 from you, 35,000 from you, 40,000 from you, et cetera. And then they could have paid it off that way, but not just dig into our pockets and take it away. And you can walk into the courthouse in Spain, in Malaga, Spain, and you walk in there and say that you want the city council to give you some money for this project. You would have all 9 of them rolling on the floor with laughter, and they would be saying things like, "You want us to give you money, the taxpayer money? You want us to do that?" You couldn't get $2,000 out of the Spanish City Council, or much less the German or the Dutch. Why are we so eager to give money away? That's what just annoys me and a lot of other citizens.
Back in Pennsylvania, Charlie, when Ed Rendell was the governor of Pennsylvania, he went and subsidized redoing the old Philadelphia Navy Yard. And he subsidized it with taxpayers' money out of the state. Do you know what that each job cost? By the time they were done, each job that they created cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to bring the jobs in. It's just craziness. And they say that they can justify it because people wouldn't come. Look, the La Palmera Mall, those guys came in and cut a deal to buy that mall, and we're going to develop that mall, and then a group of local folks got together and said, we're going to do one under the Crosstown, up at the SPID in Crosstown, and we're going to do it, and we're going to need city money, and the city decided to give them some incentive. So then what happens? La Palmera said, well, we want it too. If you're going to give it to them, give it to us. But they had the ability to do it without that. But once you offered and started putting tax money on the table, as good businessmen, they did it.
Well, that particular recipe or formula, I think, dates back all the way to when Hayden Head was a big power figure here, pretty much a political boss in Corpus Christi during the 1970s. I think he used to get the big people. He used to come up with a big idea. The media, the Color Times pretty much.
Cecil Burney, they were powerful.
The Color Times pretty much has been a mouthpiece for this particular type of, should I call it a ruse? They sell it to the public. They tell the public, how do you want to improve this community? Think of all these ideas. The thing is, they need to come up with money. They need more money. So the builders, they get all these builders, and then Hayden Head used to do this, get them together, and they said, we need some advertisement dollars to promote this idea. Then they brought in and they created American Bank, by the way, didn't exist. They created American Bank during that time, and they brought in L. Jones, who's pretty much the CEO, and been I think they recruited him from Austin or somewhere. He don't have a degree to this day. He runs American Bank, and pretty much they institutionalized the idea of that a political boss, Hayden Head Sr. had, and basically what happens is this. Like Destination Bayfront. Somebody puts up that money, and it usually comes from the developers to sell it to the public, the advertisement dollars. Who builds it? The contractors build it. Who puts up the money and makes the money and the interest? Those particular banks. So they call it, I remember the Taxpayers Association used to call it the Holy Trinity. The only problem with the taxpayers during their active years, their knowledge base was so high about budgets that they couldn't communicate. They couldn't communicate it to the average person.
Last word, Charlie. You got the last word.
Yeah, we just got to stop. The developer comes in and then we give him tax incentives and tax breaks so he can build here. Yeah, we've got to stop. That's childish stuff. You don't give somebody money or you let them not pay taxes because they want to make money here. That's just a crazy, crazy idea for an investor to do. And why we would give them a tax break of X $100,000 or more millions of dollars, that's stupid politics.
Last word. Do you drink the water? You drinking the water again yet or what?
Hey, look, I've got my mineral water here. That's what I'm drinking. I can't drink the other stuff because it tastes like bleach.
Oh, yeah, I hear you. Thank you for your call, Charlie. Be safe out there. It's 8:50 on News Talk 1440 Keys. We'll be right back. 8:53 on the Bob Jones Show here on News Talk 1440 Keys. So, 3 water boils in 10 months. Wastewater issues ahead that could cost $1 billion. Streets repairs in disrepair for years and years, 10, 20 years more. City councils, decision, non-decision. City manager leaving. 4 of the top 5 managing officials have already left the city. The water boil, TCEQ, pipelines. I mean, do you trust them? Do you trust the water? I mean, we're trying to look behind the curtain, not only see how we got here, because if you don't know how you got here, you're never going to have an idea how to get out. What's the kind of sum of what we've been talking about, Homer, this time?
Basically, Bob, what I wanted to do today was just peek inside this complex issue involved with the city council, because the problem, I look at it like a house. You got to look at the foundation first that's holding up that house. And I think the voters need to understand, first of all, who the players are, who the factions are, what their proclivities or inclinations are, and start to look at who they are, where they're going, what are they doing for the community. I think, and looking at the history, I cited a lot of history today. And the reason I did that, and I did it in a very mild form, you got to keep this in mind. I didn't go deep into the history that needs to be discussed, because I feel we need to educate the citizens about the history of this area, because you cannot fight in the dark. If you don't understand how the system works, if you don't understand what an enterprise budget is, or the general fund, or where the money's coming from, you don't fully comprehend the problems. Once it's clear in your mind and graphic in your mind, you start to see. And my question was that the media is saying that Ron Olson stepped down because of those 3 water boils in 10 months. What I basically said today, I gave you enough information to prove, and I think I proved beyond a doubt, that Olson did not fall on his own sword. It was his management style. There's several problems that are going to surface in the next few years. So it's critical that we start to see both the strong points and the weak points of those factions. Is it possible
that what he was brought in to do, because he said, what you want me to do, I'm not going to last more than 5 years here. He said that at the onset. Is it possible, but what they brought him in to do, and he did it within 3 months, axed, chopped, cut, got rid of institutional memory, a lot of people who knew, had the information. And
the question is, where did it come from? And that's the question in eventual other shows I'm going to answer. You're going to see that a lot of these people that are doing this are affiliated with American Bank. And I'm going to explain why. I'm going to explain the connections, and it's up to you to believe it or not. And but one thing I do want is your opinion, information, to dig deeper. I'm encouraging all the citizens to become citizen journalists. Again, my email is Homer Villarreal, Homer Villarreal, VILLARREAL @gmail.com.
But would you say, on another way, that because of American Bank, there is a good side to their development and involvement in the community, as well as the fact that they just moved into control factor or have a lot of influence?
Everybody has the right to participate in a free enterprise economy.
Right.
The thing is, it's when you start to stifle. One of the basic premises about free enterprise is that everybody has the right to compete. But when you have a Chamber of Commerce, for instance, when Carol Scott was there, locking them into a contract that they couldn't talk to anybody, just to them, and do business with this, then you're stifling the free enterprise system, because those individuals in power make a living off of taxpayers' money. They come up with a crisis, and then they convince the public that they need to go out for bonds, and that's what so expect higher fees. Expect all those things that are going to happen. Expect the street committee that's going to say we need millions and millions of dollars to be poured in.
The good that they intended goes off the rails, goes off the track, and then you wind up with doing it because we're in control. Remember what they said?
There was one contract, then this will explain it all, Bob. There was one, when they were building Whataburger Field, for instance, there was one contractor that said, hey, man, we got 50 engineers. We can do it for the same price, and this guys only have like 5. We got 50 on our staff. Why didn't they go with a better deal? They're elitist,
Well, that's all we can take today. And coming up here on the Bob Jones Show, is it too late to let freedom ring once more? We have been watching the rewriting of American tradition. American values are right of center. All that's being changed, and with it, our freedom. We'll talk about that more when we come back. Thanks for stopping by, Homer. We appreciate it. You listen to KUIS, Corpus Christi, Texas. It's 9 o'clock. Our veteran salute at 9:05.